What if everything you've ever called reality was just one narrow version of it? A single lane on a massive, multi-dimensional highway of possibilities? What if the life you're living right now, with all its limits, struggles, and repetitive loops, is just one track you've been tuned into? Not because it's the only one available, but because it's the one your energy is currently aligned with. Imagine this. Right beside you, in every direction you can't see with your eyes, but can feel with your awareness, are infinite other realities. Realities where you're thriving, realities where you're free, realities where you've already broken through everything that seems to hold you back right now. And the craziest part? You don't need to create those versions. They already exist. They're real, but you have to shift to meet them. Think of your current reality like a radio station. You can only hear the music that matches the frequency you're tuned into. If you want to hear something new, you don't need to force the current song to change. You change the station. That's what a quantum shift really is. It's not magic. It's not wishful thinking. It's physics. The quantum field is a vast soup of possibility, and it's constantly reading your signal, your beliefs, your emotions, your expectations, and collapsing the version of reality that most closely matches your dominant vibration. Not your desires, not your words, your energy. The reality you experience is just the one your system is aligned with most consistently. You've been living inside a timeline not because it's right or fair or meant for you, but because it's the one that fits the signal you're sending out. That's not good news or bad news, it's just truth. But the power in that truth is massive. Because it means you're not trapped, you're not stuck, you're simply tuned into one song, and there are thousands more waiting for you to choose them. But here's what keeps most people frozen. They think reality is fixed, that what's in front of them is all there is. They treat circumstances like cages instead of reflections. So they chase new outcomes while staying the same person, repeating the same thoughts, reacting with the same fear, telling the same stories. And then they wonder why nothing changes. But the real reason life feels like a loop is because the signal hasn't changed. And until it does, the quantum field keeps reflecting the same version of you over and over and over. Now let's go deeper into the trap that holds so many people in place, even when they want change, even when they're trying. The truth is, most people are not stuck because they lack discipline or willpower. They're stuck because their internal system is still calibrated to an outdated identity. Their frequency is still echoing the past. They've upgraded their goals, but not their baseline energy. So even when they visualize new things, affirm new outcomes, or work toward big dreams, underneath it all, their body is still signaling fear, their subconscious is still wired to expect disappointment, and their emotions still cycle through the same familiar patterns that kept them safe in an older timeline. This is the frequency lock. It's not visible, but it's incredibly real. And it happens when your nervous system, your subconscious mind, and your emotional patterns are all attuned to a version of reality that's already expired. But because it's familiar, it feels safe. And the subconscious mind doesn't care if familiar equals unhappy. It just cares that it's known. And so you keep showing up as the same person because your system is wired that way. You speak about what you want, but your energy is still carrying the memory of what hurt. You try to believe in a new outcome, but your body still tenses when things go well, bracing for the fall. You declare change, but deep down, you're still rehearsing the worst-case scenario. This is the contradiction the quantum field picks up on, not your surface-level thoughts, but your dominant signal. That's the code that creates your current experience. The good news is, once you become aware of the frequency lock, you can start to rewrite it, not by force, not by pretending everything's perfect, but by bringing your system into coherence with the version of you that already lives in the timeline you desire. And that version isn't an idea, it's a vibration. It's already here. You don't need to climb toward it, you need to tune into it. The quantum shift isn't about doing more, it's about being differently. When that happens, when your thoughts, your feelings, and your nervous system begin to speak the same language, reality has no choice but to rearrange itself around you. Not someday, instantly. Because in the quantum, the moment you shift internally, the external begins to mirror, not as a reward, but as a natural response. You've probably heard the phrase, "You attract what you are, not what you want." But have you really sat with what that means? In the quantum field, your desires don't carry weight unless they're supported by alignment. Wanting more money doesn't mean you're attracting it. Wanting love doesn't guarantee it shows up. Wanting peace, success, or freedom doesn't automatically make those things real. Why? Because in the quantum, the field doesn't respond to your wants. It responds to your frequency, and your frequency is the energetic sum of your dominant thoughts, your subconscious beliefs, your emotional patterns, and your embodied habits. So if you're saying, "I am ready to receive," but deep down you're bracing for disappointment, you're not attracting what you're asking for. You're magnetizing more of what you're actually feeling. This is the silent contradiction that keeps people stuck. You can declare abundance, but if every financial decision fills you with panic, the field picks up on panic, not prosperity. You can affirm, "I am loved," but if your heart is closed off and guarded, what the field hears is resistance, not readiness. You might even take inspired action, but if that action is fueled by fear, fear of missing out, fear of not being enough, fear of being left behind, then that fear becomes the energetic signature of what you're creating. And here's the part no one tells you. The quantum field doesn't care how loudly you speak your affirmations, how long you meditate, or how beautifully you visualize. It cares about what signal your entire system is emitting consistently, not occasionally, but dominantly. That means your signal is not just what you think, but what you expect, what you prepare for, what you feel safe holding. So if you want to know what you're attracting, look at what you're rehearsing emotionally. Are you rehearsing joy or disappointment? Are you mentally living in a future full of trust or secretly waiting for the rug to be pulled out from under you? This is why you can try everything the manifestation world suggests: affirmations, vision boards, scripting, full moon rituals, and still feel stuck. Because the field isn't reflecting your conscious intentions, it's reflecting your coherence. It's mirroring the signal that your whole being is putting out, especially the parts of you you don't even realize are active. So the real work isn't in trying harder, it's in becoming the version of you who already lives in the reality you're seeking. That version doesn't just want love, they embody openness. They move through life with a relaxed nervous system that's safe enough to receive connection. They speak differently, they expect reciprocity. They walk into rooms not looking for approval but offering presence. The version of you who lives in abundance doesn't just repeat, "I am wealthy." They feel safe being seen. They feel worthy of overflow. They hold generosity in their actions. Their relationship with money is one of trust, not desperation. And the version of you who lives in peace isn't waiting for everything to calm down. They've already chosen inner stillness as a baseline, not a reward. And here's where quantum physics helps us understand what's really going on beneath the surface. In quantum mechanics, there's a principle called the observer effect, one of the strangest and most powerful discoveries in science. It tells us that the act of observation itself influences the outcome. In other words, nothing becomes real until it is observed. Reality doesn't just unfold on its own, it responds to the observer. But here's the twist. You're not observing with your eyes. You're observing with your focus, your beliefs, your energetic presence. Every thought you habitually return to, every feeling you reinforce, every expectation you hold, that's the lens through which you're observing the quantum field. And that observation is what collapses infinite potential into a single outcome. Now, combine this with what we know from neuroscience, that around 95% of your behavior, your reactions, your feelings, and your identity are driven by the subconscious mind. So while you may consciously be trying to create a better life from the 5% of you that's aware and awake, the other 95% is still playing out old emotional codes, inherited fears, and past survival patterns. And that is what's observing reality most of the time. That's the observer the field is listening to. So when people say, "Why isn't manifestation working for me?" the deeper truth is often this: it is working, just not in the direction they want, because the signal coming from their subconscious is more dominant than the signal coming from their conscious mind. This is why you can move cities, change partners, shift jobs, and still find yourself in the same loop, because the frequency didn't change, because the observer didn't shift. You may have rearranged the outside, but the inner lens, the signal that creates the collapse of potential into form, was still tuned to fear or lack or unworthiness, and the field, without judgment, simply mirrored it back. So if you want a different reality, you don't have to force the universe to give it to you. You simply have to become the kind of observer who sees life differently, who expects differently, who feels differently, not once, but consistently enough that the new signal becomes your baseline. And this is where the real shift happens. Not in the external world, not in a lucky break, not in someone else giving you permission. The real shift happens when you reclaim your power as the observer and begin to observe the world, not through the lens of your wounds, your conditioning, or your fear, but through the lens of the future you've already chosen, a future you're no longer hoping for, but living from. Here's the strange truth most people never realize. We stay stuck not because we like where we are, but because it feels safer than the unknown. The old timeline, even when it's painful, frustrating, or limiting, feels familiar, and to your subconscious, familiar equals safe. This is how people get trapped in emotional cages of their own history, not because they aren't brave, not because they aren't trying, but because some part of them has learned, deep down, that staying small, staying in the loop, staying where it's predictable, means survival. It's not logical, it's biological. Your nervous system would rather repeat a known discomfort than risk an unfamiliar expansion. It would rather stay in a storm it understands than step into a clear sky it's never seen. And so, unconsciously, you keep reinforcing the same timeline, not because it's right for you, but because your system has been conditioned to recognize it as home. That's where resistance comes in. Resistance isn't just procrastination or laziness. It's a protective mechanism. It shows up when you get close to change. It's the hesitation before the leap, the overthinking before the decision, the sudden fatigue when you finally have time to act. It's the voice in your head that says, "Be realistic," or "What if it doesn't work?" or "You're not ready yet." Resistance will disguise itself as logic. It will feel like a warning, like intuition, like caution. But what it really is a test of whether your system is still loyal to the past or open to the unknown. And it's not there to punish you. It's there because your body, your emotional chemistry, your habitual responses, your identity hasn't yet felt safe inside the frequency of the new timeline. So every time you move toward it, the old version of you resists. Not out of weakness, but out of habit. You might be thinking, "But I want change. I'm ready." And you are. But wanting isn't the same as embodying. You have to make the new frequency feel more safe than the old one. You have to train your nervous system to relax into the vibration of abundance, love, freedom before those things show up. Because if you don't, you'll keep unconsciously sabotaging the shift. You'll chase change, but retreat when it arrives. You'll start new habits but slip back into old behaviors. You'll crave the new timeline while feeding the old one, energetically, emotionally, chemically. And this is why transformation so often feels like a war with yourself. Because it is. It's a war between who you've been and who you're becoming. And that war doesn't end with willpower, it ends with coherence. To change timelines, you must stop trying to fight the old one and start becoming the frequency of the new one. Not someday, not when the conditions are perfect. Now, because the quantum field doesn't wait for you to arrive, it responds the moment your entire system starts humming at the vibration of the new self. That's when the shift happens, not because you earned it, but because you matched it. And this brings us to one of the most powerful truths in quantum transformation. You don't get the timeline you want, you get the timeline you become. Becoming isn't about pretending, it's not about faking confidence or forcing positivity. Becoming is about creating such deep internal coherence that the new timeline has no choice but to recognize you. It's not a performance, it's an identity shift. An identity isn't about what you think, It's about what you expect, how you react, what you allow, and what you embody. So, how do you become the signal? You begin by acting as if the new timeline is already your reality. Not in a delusional way, but in a precise, vibrational way. You train your nervous system to feel safe in the new frequency. You create emotional familiarity with success, with love, with abundance. You show your body that it's safe to be seen, to be supported, to be powerful. This is embodiment. And embodiment is the bridge between the intention and the result. Let's say you're shifting into a timeline of financial freedom. You can't just say, "I am abundant," while still clenching every time you spend money. You have to notice how your body reacts to financial flow. Do you tense up? Do you brace for loss? Do you feel guilt? Embodiment means recognizing those reactions and gently, consistently replacing them with a new signal. Trust, relaxation, gratitude. You learn to feel abundance before the external reflects it. That feeling becomes the broadcast. If you're stepping into a timeline of love, you can't just visualize a perfect partner while guarding your heart with walls of steel. Embodiment means opening, even when it's uncomfortable. It means softening in moments when your instincts scream to shut down. It means practicing presence, kindness, intimacy, not just with others, but with yourself. Because the field isn't fooled, it reads the vibration beneath the words. It reflects who you are, not who you pretend to be. And if you're stepping into a timeline of healing, you must stop relating to your body as broken. You begin to move as though you are regenerating. You speak as though your system is wise, not flawed. You choose nourishment, rest, movement, not from punishment, but from reverence. That shift in energy signals to the field. This is the version of me I'm choosing. This is the timeline I now occupy. The key is repetition, consistency, because the quantum field doesn't reward sudden intensity, it responds to coherence over time. The more often you act, feel, and live as the new version of yourself, the more stable that timeline becomes. And eventually, it becomes the only reality that makes sense. The old timeline loses its grip, not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it. You stopped rehearsing it. You stopped identifying with it. And when that happens, the shift becomes effortless. It becomes natural, because you are no longer trying to become, you are. Most people think change happens in the mind, that if they can just think positive thoughts, repeat the right affirmations, or set clear intentions, reality will eventually catch up. But here's the deeper truth. The mind might spark awareness, but it's the body that actually changes the frequency. Your body is the tuning fork. It holds the signal. It sends the broadcast. And if your body is still wired for fear, lack, tension, or defense, it doesn't matter how many vision boards you make. The field will respond to the vibration of contraction, not the intention of expansion. This is why the missing piece for so many people is embodiment. Embodiment isn't just a buzzword or a spiritual cliché. It's the mechanism through which reality begins to shift. It's what happens when your thoughts, emotions, posture, breath, and behaviors are all aligned with the same frequency. When your system starts to live the reality you're choosing before there's external evidence of it, that's when the field says yes. Not because you forced it, but because you matched it. Think of it like this. If you say, "I am confident," but your shoulders are slumped, your jaw is tense, and your inner dialogue is doubting every step you take, then the field hears contradiction. But if you shift your breath, lift your posture, speak from groundedness, and act from clarity, not perfection, just coherence, then the frequency becomes clean. The message becomes clear, and the field reflects that clarity. This is embodiment. It's not about pretending you're someone you're not. It's about fully becoming the version of you who already lives in the reality you want. And the only way to do that is through action, through sensation, through presence, not just thought. Let's make it real. If you're trying to shift into an abundance timeline, embodiment doesn't mean you go out and recklessly spend money you don't have to prove a point. It means you regulate your nervous system around financial flow. You breathe deeply when scarcity thoughts arise instead of spiraling into panic. You notice where your energy tightens around money and you soften. You stop feeding the story of not enough and start practicing the feeling of sufficiency, even with what you have. You make grounded, grateful decisions. You express generosity, not because you want to impress the universe, but because generosity is the language of abundance. Your system learns to feel safe in overflow, and the more that feeling becomes familiar, the more the external begins to mirror it. If you're trying to shift into a timeline of deep connection or love, embodiment might mean learning how to stay open in moments where you usually shut down. It means recognizing when you're operating from the wounds of your past and gently choosing new behavior. It might look like softening your voice, making eye contact, speaking honestly even when your heart pounds. It might mean letting yourself receive, without guilt, without suspicion. Because when you act like someone who's already safe to be loved, the field begins to reflect relationships that mirror that safety. It's not magic, it's alignment. And if your timeline is about health, then embodiment becomes how you relate to your body moment by moment. Do you treat it like a machine that keeps breaking, or like a sacred vessel that's constantly recalibrating and healing? Do you punish it when it's tired, or do you listen? Do you eat, move, and rest from fear, or from love? Embodiment in this case isn't about strict routines or unrealistic standards. It's about choosing presence with your body again and again. It's about creating a chemistry of support inside your cells so that every time your body receives a signal, it knows it's safe to heal. Now here's the part most people miss. The shift doesn't come from doing big, dramatic things once. It comes from small, consistent signals that reinforce a new identity over time. Micro-alignment, moment-to-moment coherence. That's the real key. A single, small act done from deep alignment is more powerful than a huge, frantic leap taken from fear or desperation. That's how the quantum field reads energy, not in the size of the act, but in the integrity of it. So let's talk about what those micro-shifts actually look like. If you want to shift timelines, stop waiting for the external world to give you permission. Start living from the internal reality first. Choose one small action today that matches the version of you who already lives in the timeline you desire. Maybe it's how you breathe when you wake up. Maybe it's the words you choose in a conversation. Maybe it's how you respond to challenge with curiosity instead of panic. These small, intentional acts are like codes. They send a clear message to the field. This is who I am now. And when you repeat them, when you embody them, they compound. Your vibration stabilizes. The old timeline begins to dissolve, not because you pushed it away, but because you stopped aligning with it. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get it right every time. You just have to return. Return to the new signal. Return to the embodied self. Every time you notice yourself slipping into the old loop and you gently bring your awareness back, you build strength in the new frequency. That moment of choice is what collapses the wave. That's the quantum shift. It doesn't look dramatic on the surface. It might just look like a breath, a pause, a softened reaction. But energetically, it's massive. It's a signal that says, the old program no longer controls me. I am tuning into something new. This is where your power really lives, not in massive external effort, but in consistent internal coherence. You are the tuning fork, and every action, every breath, every choice is a vote for the reality you're creating. When those votes stack up, the timeline becomes real, not because it was granted to you, but because you became it. And that is the essence of embodiment. That is how quantum leaps are built, not through speed, but through resonance, through becoming, completely and unapologetically, the signal of the life you've already claimed. The biggest misconception people carry about transformation is that it happens in one grand moment, a single breakthrough, a sudden realization, a flash of magic where everything changes. But that's not how reality works in the quantum. In truth, shifting timelines is not about one big leap. It's about learning how to stay in the new signal. Sustainability is what makes a shift real, not your ability to reach it once, but your ability to live there, breathe there, make decisions from there, even when the old timeline tries to pull you back. The quantum field doesn't reward quick flashes of inspiration. It reshapes around consistency. And the moment you stop treating the shift like an event and start living it as a practice, that's when everything begins to change. Think about it. Anyone can have a high-vibe day. Anyone can feel aligned after a powerful meditation or inspiring video. But can you hold that alignment when life gets messy, when doubts creep in, when triggers arise? That's the real test, not of worthiness, but of readiness. The old timeline won't go down without a fight. It will test you with familiar patterns, familiar emotions, familiar reactions. Not because it wants to win, but because your nervous system is still wired to it. And so, even when the new timeline is available, your body may still reach for the old one out of habit. That's where sustainability comes in. It's the emotional and energetic skill of returning, of catching the slip and choosing to realign again and again until the new vibration becomes your new normal. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel good all the time. It doesn't mean pretending challenges don't exist. It means building the capacity to notice when you've fallen into the old pattern and then gently guide yourself back, not with judgment, but with love. Because every time you do that, you make the new timeline stronger. You stabilize it. You confirm to the field, this is who I am now. And eventually, the old version of you becomes so irrelevant that it simply dissolves. Not because you destroyed it, but because you stopped identifying with it. You stopped feeding it with your attention, your emotions, and your story. So how do you sustain the shift? Start with daily awareness. Before your day begins, ask yourself, what frequency am I bringing into today? Am I carrying fear, hesitation, scarcity? Or am I choosing trust, openness, and flow? That question alone sets a tone. It tunes your system before the world can pull you off course. And then, throughout your day, keep checking in. Not obsessively, but intentionally. Micro-align. If your desired timeline is about abundance, then when you make a decision, ask yourself, am I acting from trust or fear? If your timeline is about love, ask, am I opening or protecting? If it's about health, ask, am I nurturing or neglecting? These questions aren't about morality. They're about frequency. They help you track whether you're aligned with the version of you who already lives in the life you say you want. And when you get triggered, because you will, breathe, ground, return. Don't try to override the emotion. Don't shame yourself for slipping. The quantum doesn't punish imperfection. It responds to energy. And the energy of someone who can return to coherence is more powerful than the energy of someone who's pretending to always be there. Each return strengthens the signal. Each act of alignment reinforces the shift. Now add symbols and reminders to your environment. Numbers, mantras, images, anything that anchors your nervous system to the new identity. These aren't just decorations, they're stabilizers. When you see them, your system remembers, oh right, this is who I'm becoming. And remember to surround yourself with people, spaces, and voices that reflect the timeline you're stepping into. Community matters, not because you need validation, but because coherence is contagious. When you're around others who are committed to their own alignment, it's easier to stay connected to yours. And finally, gratitude, not as a checklist, not as a performance, but as a frequency, the emotional signature of already having. When you practice gratitude for the version of you that already exists in the timeline you're stepping into, you amplify that frequency. You speed up the collapse of the wave because you're no longer saying, I hope I get there. You're saying, I'm already there and I see it, I feel it, I trust it. That feeling sends a signal to the quantum field that says, I am no longer chasing, I am being. And in that space, reality responds instantly, not with delay, not with resistance, but with reflection. Now pause and ask yourself, what would your day look like if you moved, spoke, breathed, and chose from the identity of your future self? Not the one you're becoming, but the one you've already decided to be. What habits would shift? What reactions would dissolve? What boundaries would solidify? What would you stop tolerating? What would you finally say yes to? Because those choices are the infrastructure of your new timeline. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. You just need to live today from a different signal, and then do it again tomorrow, and again the next day, until the signal becomes the most natural thing in the world. That's how timelines shift. That's how you become unrecognizable to your past. Not by chasing transformation, but by being the frequency that calls it into form. You are no longer here to wait. You are no longer here to hope. You are here to tune. And once you understand that, once you start living like the shift has already happened, the field will have no choice but to collapse a new reality around you. Not because you forced it, because you matched it.